Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you. Hello, welcome to the Foreign Policy Review. I am Dustin Pickering, your host, and today is Thursday. We're going to talk about Ukraine again, and we have CARLO PARCELLI and Billy Bob as our co-host, and today's guest is PAULA DENSLATER. Thanks for joining us on the program today, PAULA. If you'd like, tell us a little bit about yourself, where we can find you, and what you're doing currently politically, and what your activities are.
Well, I have a blog that I never write on. I feel like I mostly spend my time on Facebook sharing information under PAULA DENSLATER. I do have a blog. I do have a podcast. It's wagelabor.podbean.com. And the last thing I did was I went to Nashville and leafleted for Julian Assange at a Roger Waters concert last Saturday.
Okay, excellent. So
my life leaflet.
Wonderful, passing out leaflets. Hey, just keep the activism going. Keep the spreading the word about all causes that are great and good for the Republic. Keep it going.
Yeah.
So,
remember Ronald Reagan that said we could all survive nuclear war with enough shovels? So my husband and I always joke, with enough leaflets, we'll make the revolution. We're out there handing out leaflets all the time.
There's a good counter phrase for you. So do we have, is either Billy Bob or CARLO, do you guys have questions to get us started with the program?
Go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. PAULA, just again, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. I've listened to a couple of your podcasts, especially the ones on Ukraine. Well, I listened to two about Ukraine, and I found them very informative, very, very insightful, and you touched on every aspect of that conflict in a great way with a great perspective. So, this morning I woke up to the breaking news. The Military Summary Channel had like about a 4-minute thing, just talking about the most recent provocation or escalation or effort by the government of Ukraine to I guess they sent across the river about 7 boats with commandos on them to take over the Zaporizhia, I'm saying that wrong, power plant, which the IAEA was today going to inspect. So the UN had like inspectors to look at this plant to make sure it was okay and that we weren't at risk for another Chernobyl, figure out who is shelling it and putting this at risk. And the very day that they're supposed to come, the Ukrainians launch a commando attack on it from across the river. So, that's a good place to start. It's breaking news. It's pretty interesting. I'm not even sure how it turns out. I don't have, that I saw that from 7 hours ago. So do you have any updates or do you have any insight into that issue?
Well, I went to Muna, Alabama, and he said that they had, the Russians had sunk the boats and there was more. And apparently, according to the Russians, there were some Brits involved in this. And I think they said there was 320 people. And some people say that they were going to try and take the IAEA people hostage, which I think is bizarre. I have no idea why they did this, but it reminds me of, remember when the U.S.-backed terrorists in Syria were bombing the Syrian soldiers with sarin, and the Syrian government complained and asked the OPCW to send inspectors to check it out. And as they got there, they gassed a bunch of, well, it turned out they were children kidnapped from Alawite villages, but we didn't know it at the time. They just showed us a big pile of dead children and said Syria did it. So Syria invites inspectors, and right as the inspectors get there, they gas a bunch of kids. Because that makes sense. Not. Even the Brits didn't fall for that one. Remember that? Even they refused to bomb Syria on that one. But that's what this reminds me of. Russia invites inspectors, which is stupid anyhow. Like America has spy planes flying, they have satellites. They can't tell where the missiles are coming from. Common sense is going to tell you that Russia is not bombing their own soldiers in their own power, Russia-controlled power plant on Russia-controlled territory. I mean, the whole thing is absurd to even proclaim, but they haven't stopped proclaiming it. They keep saying it over and over. So I assume they're going to spin this the same way they spun it in Syria. The Russians were in those boats from the other side. I mean, who knows? But the whole thing's bizarre.
It's going to be a big challenge for the journalists of the New York Times to come up with a narrative that makes any kind of sense to make Russia look bad. They're going to try. It'll be entertaining to try, to read their best effort. But we look forward to that. But yeah, it seems obvious, and but we'll see how they try and spin it. And the problem is, their spin on it is going to be the one that's magnified everywhere, and it's going to be magnified times a million, and that's what everybody's going to read. And most people are going to be ignorant of the basic facts, and they're going to just buy the false narrative. Carlo, you have some thoughts. I'm the deer.
No, frankly, I don't. The whole situation is so comic to me that it kind of leaves me blank. The whole notion that, the military summary, he seemed to imply that that this was planned, that the inspectors knew that they were going to be taken hostage in advance, and this was kind of like a kind of international relations sitcom that they were gonna have, and they knew that they were going to be taken. And then they were going to blame it on the Russians for. I'm flabbergasted by the whole thing. I think it's a sign of the kind of desperation that's actually dictating events in Ukraine right now, including the Kherson supposed offensive, which is another ludicrous enterprise as far as I can tell right now. So I really don't have much to add beyond that.
You mentioned before the show, Carlo, you mentioned something which I found interesting. You said there was 2 Chinese inspectors, and they were going to be the ones that perhaps were going to have the difficulty with going along with the plan. Like, so quite possibly, like Paula says, they could be. I don't know if Paula said that, but the IAEA could be, there could be members within the IAEA who are actual Western agents that are part of an operation, and they were planning on, knowing that they were going to become hostages, quote unquote, of the Ukrainian commandos that took over the area, and they wouldn't be called hostages. Like, I think that the military summary called them hostages, but they would be essentially hostages in that they couldn't leave, and that would be protecting the Ukrainians from a counterattack kind of thing. So that's kind of plausible. And then the only wild card in that situation would be the Chinese inspectors wouldn't want to go along with that. But I'm sure some of the Western inspectors would be happy to, because, they're partisans. But it's all, we're speculating. We're speculating quite a bit here.
Yeah. And military summary batted that notion away too, when he simply said that who would believe the Chinese in the West? So the propaganda is intense with the Chinese too. So obviously the Chinese are going to take the side of the Russians and lie about this. So I have nothing else to add about it right now.
Well, as Maria we'll see, now I'm going to call her Zakharova said way back when Obama was president, right after the violent coup of 2014, that John Kerry had told her. She had said, well, we're going to tell the truth. And John Kerry just sneered at her and said, we control the media. It doesn't matter what you say. We control the media, so we're going to control the spin. And he flat out said it to her, which I thought was amazing, but it's true. I just read something that said the Ukrainians are putting on a Marvel movie and the Russians are putting on a webinar with PowerPoint. You know, it's like the propaganda and the show of the Americans, who obviously are controlling Ukraine. They're good at this. They've been doing Hollywood for 100 years. So they're really, really good at putting on a show. But this is like Fonzie jumping the shark. I mean, I just do not see how they can possibly make this into any kind of plausible. But on the other hand, it's not plausible that the Russians are bombing themselves. And they just keep saying it. So who knows?
So that brings up the larger point between what you can achieve with propaganda and no military success, as opposed to the Russians, who are all military success and no propaganda. Your thoughts, Paul, on that?
I think they're trying to kill off Ukrainians as well as Russians. I think they want to really and truly, as they say, fight to the last Ukrainian, because the Ukraine has the best farmland in all of Europe. It has forests, it has resources, but they also have a constitution that says that that is for the people of Ukraine and they can't sell it to foreigners. Now, Monsanto, Cargill, Bayer have all gotten around it by putting shell companies up, but I think they want to wipe out as many Ukrainians as possible so they can move into Ukraine and take it over. Because that's, as we know, we are now in a, what is it? $400 trillion debt bubble or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did we lose you,
froze
Paula?
Yeah,
we
we
froze
lost
up a little bit, Paula. But yeah, no, I think that's their wildest dream. In their wildest dream, you know, they're hoping, you know, I really think they thought it was possible to actually get a victory against Russia. So in their really wildest dream, and there was some in the Ukrainian government. I forget that one guy. He was the main advisor to Zelensky. His name is escaping me right now, but a few years before, you know, he had about a 3-minute video segment that went viral, and he essentially said, I didn't even see it until after the special military operation started, but he essentially predicted everything that's going on right now, and he said, this is what's going to happen. It's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years, and we're hoping to win. We are hoping to defeat Russia. And, you know, they had been trained by NATO for 8 years. They had gotten, you know, all kinds of weapons and support, and they were going to have the satellites, and they were going to have, you know, the Western generals on the ground telling them what to do and how to do it. So that was the hope. But yeah, if that doesn't work out, we'll just burn everything to the ground. We'll kill everyone, and we will create terrific enmity, you know, terrible enmity between Ukraine and Russia, make it ungovernable. And then we can get our, you know, corporations in, and we can loot their resources. I mean, so yeah, they're gonna do their very best to do that. But it's not a for sure thing. I mean, you know, we'll see what happens. It's in theory, that's their hope, but reality is a totally different thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say that Zelensky has been on a campaign to privatize Ukraine as we speak. I mean, I don't know if this is a response to, you know, the notion he realizes it's going to happen anyway, so he might as well get a taste, or because of course bribery is a huge part of all of this, but or what? But that's a factor. I mean, why would he be privatizing now if the fate of the country was going to be later on to be privatized in a much more intense way later on? I don't know. Maybe somebody has some ideas around that. I don't know.
Well, remember, this was also aimed at Germany and destroying Russia's economy. I don't know if they thought they could win militarily against Russia, but they sure thought that they could destroy Russia with sanctions. They believed that with all their little hearts. They were sure that they were going to destroy Russia. And all they could talk about was, before the intervention started, Nord Stream 2, Nord Stream 2, Nord Stream 2, Nord Stream 2. They wanted to shut that down because if you'll remember, Lord Ishmay, the first Secretary General of NATO, said that the purpose of NATO was to keep the United States in, Russia out, and Germany down. Well, NATO's still here. People are like, why is NATO still here 31 years after the Soviet Union was destroyed? Because they're still keeping the United States in, Russia out, and Germany down. And if Nord Stream 2 would have opened, this was a threat to the United States, who wants to be the boss of the world. And I mean, they talked about it constantly. I don't know how anyone wouldn't realize that that was one of the main goals, was to shut down Nord Stream 2. I don't know if they thought it would go this far. I think what the United States thought was Russia was only going to go into the Donbass, and that was it. And then they could sit there in their fortified bunkers and trenches and just pick off Russians the way they've been picking off Ukrainians, Eastern Ukrainians, for all these years, right? I think that's what they thought. I don't think they thought Russia was going to just come in full bore.
Yeah. Also all of Europe. I mean, go all the way back to 1993 to the project for the New American Centuries, like most public reports, about 87 pages. They talk about keeping the EU down because they saw the EU as an economic threat. So this is accomplishing that goal in spades. I mean, it's just it's at the brink of destroying the EU. So that was part of the master plan. This sounds like another movie script, but
Paula, you talked about your podcast, and you gave us the title, but then it kind of glitched out and I didn't quite catch it. But something about class, right?
Well, my husband and I have a show called Class Matters, but the name of my podcast is, I think it's Wage Labor or Occupy. I'm not sure. This was set up by a friend of mine way back, like 20 years ago, and I never used it until COVID, because once COVID came around, I could no longer go on the radio station all by myself. It might make someone sick. Anyhow, so we started doing it from home, and it's just so much better to do it from home than to drive in there, that I just keep doing it. But once I did that, then I could use the Podbean. So that's a long explanation that you didn't need to know. It's either Occupy or Wage Laborer.
Class Matters. That was the one that struck me, because I heard that name at the beginning of one of the ones I listened to, and I thought, yeah, I mean, that's one of my biggest things I try and communicate to people, is that there's a such thing as class, and it really, really matters, and you can't understand what's happening in Europe right now without understanding that there's two classes, right? You have a ruling capitalist class that is happy to sacrifice the interests of the working class in order to further their own, capitalist class interests. And without understanding class, you can't figure out why the hell is Europe doing that to themselves. It's because it's not going to hurt the capitalists. Right. It's going to hurt the working class, and it's going to benefit the capitalists. So yeah, class definitely matters. And these people, these analysts that come at this without appreciating the reality of oppositional class interests, and they try and explain these things, are just wasting. They're just so lost. So class definitely matters, and I wanted to make that point.
Well, what about? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Carlo.
What about the so-called counteroffensive that Ukraine has launched? Any thoughts?
Yeah. So as far as the counteroffensive into Kherson, I mean, by all reports, it's been a relative failure. It's you hear both sides, right? And you really can't trust both sides. I mean, it seems that one side has been more trustworthy with their information, but you know, we don't have, it's hard to find an objective source. So we have the Russian Ministry of Defense, we have the Ukrainian, you know, propaganda side, and I think essentially the Russian Ministry of Defense is saying that it has been, you know, pretty much a failure, that there have been very few gains made by the Ukrainian in their offensive, and you know, and the Ukrainians themselves, on the other hand, they're not. I think they're even refusing to say which cities they captured, and I'm thinking they're refusing to say which cities they captured because they haven't captured too many cities. But Paula, have you been following that at all? You know, the Kherson offensive. What are your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
I think Dima showed a Google map of the city they captured. It was basically just a row of shops along the highway. So yeah, that they did capture that. I would say that I believe the Russians more than the Ukrainians. And
Yeah.
I note that the Pentagon is not making any claims. So I'm going to say that it's failing.
Yeah, when they don't, you know, present an argument, and when they're not out loud about what they've done, and they're always gonna, if they do a little bit, they're gonna pretend it's a whole lot, and when they don't even pretend there's a little bit, you can assume it didn't go that good. I mean, that's my approach.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah,
with.
apparently.
I'm sorry, I agree with that. I just wanted to say I like to look up the populations of these villages that are supposedly captured. And I looked up one last night, and before the war started, it had a population of 146, and the 3 streets and no traffic lights. It's ludicrous, you know, to say they captured this village. First of all, the Russians weren't occupying it, so who'd you capture it from? The dogs, the cats? Yeah. So it seems like Boris Johnson wanted to have his counteroffensive. And he told Zelensky, look, we're not going to send you any more weapons unless you can prove to us that you can launch this counteroffensive. So Zelensky went against his own military, and he said, we're going to launch this counteroffensive, and they have had some minor successes. Nothing that can't be, you know, turned around by the Russians in a matter of hours, if not, you know, days, if not hours. But it does seem like it's failing. I mean, look at the Russians are 20 kilometers, 17 kilometers outside of Mykolaiv. Who would have ever thought they would be there at this point? So I'm you know, I don't think it's been effective.
Well, going by Dima again, he says that they have to keep this going till September 8th, because September 8th is when they're going to meet with he calls them vendors, to get more weapons and ammo. So they have to put up a show of, look at us, we're fighting. So he thinks it's going to go on until September 8th. That would be one more week. I don't know if they can do it, but we'll see.
You know, yeah. I'm reminded of the last meeting they had with the vendors. As I recall, it didn't go so well. It was hit by a couple of
yes.
I forget the name of those missiles, but then for the weeks after that, you heard they you know, all the colonels and generals that died, the subsequent weeks, they would release a name every other day, but you knew it was related to that one missile strike. The other thing I saw was there was just a warning by the Ministry of Defense, you know, Russia's Ministry of Defense, that if there was any attack on Transnistria, that, you know, Russia would see that as an attack on Russia itself. So it was kind of a warning to, you know, Poland, Moldova, and those other countries in the area, that if you guys are thinking about, you know, doing any kind of preemptive assault on Transnistria, it's not gonna go good for you. So I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure what intel they had that led to that, but we can speculate.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, obviously they're trying to open up other fronts, but terrorists. Basically terrorism. Basically, we're going to hit you in Kazakhstan. We're going to hit you in Belarus. We're going to hit you in Transnistria. What was that little island up there that Russians live on? And then all of a sudden, Norway or somebody, Finland, Sweden, one of those countries up there said, no, you know what? You can no longer supply your citizens on this island. They're just being nasty. But, they're trying to divert attention by terrorist attacks in various places. So,
well, Kaliningrad, yeah, it's not actually an island. It's just part of. It's attached to Lithuania. I think it's Kaliningrad. Yeah, and if the Russians can't reach it by road or rail, like they've had agreements for decades, they have to go by sea. But you're right. I think the key now is it's looking like counterterrorism. It's looking like kind of a guerrilla warfare, little fragmented attacks here and there. Yeah. Yeah,
asymmetric warfare for sure. I do want to explain that Paula was referencing two different things. So Kaliningrad is one thing, but there was an actual island where Russians live on, and it might have been Norway. And that was a long time ago, though. That was like at the very beginning of the conflict, I believe. But there's two different things. Both that island she was referencing, and then Kaliningrad's a whole nother possible point of escalation. But they've kind of diffused that, right? And they've agreed on a way that they can continue to be supplied by rail. So far so good with that. But let's talk about the bigger picture. So we're focusing here on Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine isn't happening in a vacuum. It's not the only it's in a greater context. So the greater context is, the Western imperialism has enjoyed global hegemony since 1945, essentially, and especially after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1989. And so what's happening is you have an ascendant China because, in 1971, I think, Nixon and Kissinger negotiated with China because of the Sino-Soviet split and said, hey, China, why don't you join our global economy? And I mean, we'll benefit, you'll benefit. And guess who was very happy to do that? China. And it's been a tremendous benefit for that country being allowed and afforded the economic opportunities, which has not been allowed. Cuba can't do that. DPRK, they can't do that. Iran, they're out. Venezuela, they're out. But China was offered this opportunity to engage in the global economy that was constructed by the Western powers, and it has been a tremendous benefit. And now I think the West is upset that they allowed China to do this because it created a giant. It created a unbelievably economically powerful force, which they have to contain. And if they don't contain it, they will be displaced. So they're facing their displacement. The Western Empire is facing being displaced on the global, on the global stage. And unipolarism is moving into multipolarism. And with a rising China, a rising Russia, and Iran not surrendering, Venezuela not surrendering, Syria not surrendering, Cuba, DPRK not surrendering. There's this anti-imperialist bloc. There's a rival that is just growing in power, and so the West has to do something, right? So did I stimulate anybody's thoughts while I was diatribing?
No.
No. We'll come back to that, though, because we're going to take a brief break. And I want to remind our viewers that you can leave comments, questions, any such you would like to say on our program. We'll put them on the front there. And thanks for joining us, Paula. And we'll be right back after this break.
In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted, and sometimes regressive, where the words fake news have come to mean other people's opinions, it is vital to rely on news platform with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York Parrot, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations. We focus on the news that matters, like self-empowerment, entrepreneurship, finances, health, security, politics, and more. We strive to curb violence, racial and economic discrimination, and to promote peace and socio-economic development of multiculturally diverse world. As we give voice to the people, we also give your business a voice and make it heard. Get your products and services off the ground by advertising on our fast-growing platform. With so much of daily visits to New York Parrot, you can't afford to be invisible to prospective clients on the website they trust the most. Our posts reach millions of people across the New York State and around the world. Advertising on our new site will unlock an audience of thousands of potential customers on your doorstep. New York Parrot is born to prosperously speak tomorrow for the voiceless.
America Open Market, AO Market. The best digital market for humanity is a free, multilingual, borderless market open to international sellers with various languages included. With America Open Market, you may start selling in minutes after filling out the form. Comprehensive dashboard where you understand your sales, orders, and customers is available. You get paid directly, securely, and instantly on the America Open Market. You can sell your house, car, electronic laptop, CD player, boombox, phone, headphones, furniture, and clothing, and anything on AmericaOpenMarket.com where all your sales and customer needs are met. Register as a merchant today. You will not regret becoming a vendor at America Open Market. For further inquiries, contact us at aomarket@gmail.com. AO Market, best digital marketplace for humanity. That's right. Check out America Open Market. Dustin Pickering here on the show, Foreign Policy Review. We have PAULA DENSLATER with us today. So let's continue along with what Billy Bob was saying. Let's have some thoughts on that.
I would disagree with Billy Bob on the motives of the United States going into China. I don't think they might have sold it as a win-win situation, but I think the motive of going into China was there's a billion dirt poor people there that will work for 20 cents an hour. And that was the only motive they had. They wanted it to be another Honduras, another Haiti, a place where, they would have just untold numbers of people willing to work for peanuts. And they never expect China to do anything but be poor. And so when China, and it's kind of funny, they talk about stealing intellectual property. What is this intellectual property stuff? This is humans. This is how humans advance. Somebody invents something and everybody, monkey see, monkey do. Everybody goes, oh, that's a good idea. I'm going to do that. You don't put a patent on knowledge. That's insane. That's something that the Americans only come up with in maybe the last 20 years, as far as I can see. But yeah, they thought that China was just going to provide them with cheap labor. And now they're indignant that China has actually progressed. And so they want to, put them in their place, basically.
I agree with that, basically. They saw a huge consumer market. And when Deng Xiaoping said, to grow rich is glorious, in the capitalist minds, there was only one way to grow glorious, and that was rank capitalism. And the Chinese have found a third way, essentially, and or fourth way or fifth way, and it's been more successful than traditional capitalist methods, which are based on exploitation, and that's very obvious as far as China goes worldwide. The Belt and Road Initiative has huge implications for development in other parts of the world, especially Africa, and when the Africans told what's his face Blinken to go take a hike, in so many words and in so many venues, that was an indication that they're liking Chinese before, and I know I want to be brief about this, but I know I've said this on my show. I like to read the comments that the Africans make when these events take place and when they're reported in the African press, and it's like almost 100% in favor of Chinese development over U.S. development, and you're not fooling anybody in Africa right now. Yeah, and so what does the U.S. do? They do the traditional thing. They stir up a civil war in Ethiopia over Tigray. They destroy Libya. They did coups all across Sahel, the Sahel, from Guinea to Sudan. It's not enough for them to have this base in Berber in Somaliland. Now they want to build another base, on the Red Sea, in Sudan, that will essentially replace Port Sudan with a new beachhead for U.S. military right across from Yemen, for example, and the rest of the Middle East. So it's like the U.S. can't get out of that rut that they're in. That they can't imagine an economic world where they're not exploiting people and lying to them about it. It's like, when Scott Ritter was on, I made him laugh because I said, look, us Italians, we know about this. It's called a bust out. That's what the IMF is. It's a bust out. You go in, you get a viable business. You lend it a lot of money. They can't pay it back. And then when they can't pay it back, you just, under the original agreement, you take all of their assets and you introduce this austerity to the people, which is crushing austerity. I mean, you don't have to look to Africa to that. You can look to Europe. You can look to Greece and Portugal and Italy. I mean, Draghi had the good sense to get out while the getting was good. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. Anybody else?
The West promotes this model of markets and private sector development. It's kind of anathema to the West to think about, we're going to plan and invest money in an economic plan to develop a country. And that puts them at a huge disadvantage. So their whole ideology that they promote is not as efficient and cannot do nearly as good of a job as the Chinese model. The Chinese model has state-owned enterprises, and also the private industries they're governed and ruled by the economic plans of the Communist Party. And a lot of these private industries are run by Communist Party members. So they're really subservient to the plan. Beijing comes up with the plan, and everybody follows along. And that's good. That's superior. And it's anathema to the West. The West calls that cheating. The West says China's cheating by doing that. It's ridiculous. But this free market idea is just anarchy. It's market anarchy, and it's pursuing profits, and that is never ever going to result in progress and development for Africa, for South America. It's a lie. But you go to school in the West, you learn economics, and you think, oh no, this is how you do it. This is how you do it. Free markets, austerity, no social spending. We just zero taxes for the rich developers, and they'll come in and they'll make a glorious paradise. It's nonsense. But it's important to see the distinction.
I think we can see from Europe, right?
Go ahead,
Paula.
Go ahead.
I think we can see what's happening in Europe right now shows very, very clearly that all of the so-called prosperity of capitalism, and actually communism, relies on fossil fuels. If you don't have fossil fuels, you don't have electricity, you don't have transportation, you don't have industry, you don't have warm houses, you don't have food. You don't have anything without fossil fuels. So that would be a problem with China. They don't have fossil fuels. Russia has them, but they can't supply the whole world. I mean, it is a finite resource. So we have this paradigm that because of fossil fuels, we went from, scratching in the dirt, kind of place we have now. You know, we all have electricity and hot and cold running water and lots of people have central air conditioning as well as heating. And when I was a kid, we didn't even have air conditioning, period. You know, people used to go to movies because they'd advertise it. This is air conditioning. Everyone would go in there. I don't care what the movie is. I'm hot. So anyhow, it's all new. All of this is new. The whole plane travel for the plebes. When I was a kid, you know, the plebes did not travel on the plane. That just did not happen. So all of this is based on fossil fuels. And now it looks like they're taking it, well, for one thing, the stuff the West controls is pretty much gone. And now the only places with fossil fuels left are like Russia, Iran, you know, Yemen. Yemen has, that's why they're being attacked. They have not oil, but they have natural gas. These kind of places are the only ones with fossil fuels. So they've been under attack from the United States, but they aren't falling for it. They're going, no, you know what? We think we'll go with Russia and China. We think we can get a better deal. So what is America going to do? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Are they just going to pull the plug and let us all kill each other in a civil war? Or are they going to get into a nuclear war? I mean, they cray. You have no idea what they're going to do. But here's what I know. They want to keep power. They want to keep control. They want to control the wealth. And I think they're just trying to do it whatever way they can, which is basically smash and grab. And it's not working out for them so much anymore. So what will they do now? I don't know.
I don't see a winning hand. There's no strategy that can contain China. The idea that China needs to be contained is a fundamental falsehood. And they're pursuing this nonsense that China can be contained. So yeah, what do they do? Do they end up burning it down? I'm optimistic. I think that, you know, ultimately they're going to put their own best interest first. And when they realize that, you know, they don't have any interest in a nuclear winter, you know, that's not going to benefit them any, they'll back down and they'll negotiate a decline of their imperialism, and they'll just deal with it. But that shift is only at the very beginning. Like they haven't even, you know, we're so far from that necessary, shift in understanding and realizing the reality, and then acknowledging it, and then taking the steps to adapt to it. Like that progress, we were just at the very beginning, and there's a big risk. There's a risk for miscalculation and World War III. And who knows? There's a lot of people say they want World War III. You know, that's going to lower the population. We'll be protected by our two oceans. We don't have, Canada's not going to attack us. Mexico's not going to attack us. Nobody's going to attack us from the Atlantic or Pacific. So we'll start this big war. We'll make money. We'll sell weapons. We'll destroy everybody. We'll be okay at the end, just like World War II. We came out pretty good out of World War II. And maybe that's their hope for, you know, we're just speculating, but some people think that's their plan.
Dustin, do you have anything to add?
No. I'm hoping not for World War III. I can say that. I hope that things pan out a little bit more peacefully.
Well, from an ethical point of view, why don't you think this is a ludicrous question, but this is for everybody. Why don't you think the United States can change its attitude toward development? That is, the way they do it now is they look for people that they can buy who are in power in these countries, and then they buy them, and then they make all of these huge contracts, which they don't intend to honor in the first place, and then, like with Halliburton, for example, in Iraq, all this rebuilding of Iraq after the war, very little of it actually took place. But of course, all the money went to the people who were contracted to do it. One of the most idiotic thing I deal with people down here on the killing floor where I exist is pointing out what foreign aid means. They think that you get a pallet full of money. We did send pallets full of money to Iraq, but what foreign aid is, it's like giving. It's basically just sent to American corporations who sign contracts to do work in these other countries. It's just like the military-industrial complex. Ukraine's going to get their weapons, when the U.S. arms maker get their money to build them, and then they're only going to get like 10% of what the contract was for or whatever. But that's the one hustle. But it's a very similar hustle when it comes to straight up foreign aid, food aid, medical, whatever.
Are you suggesting it's not altruism?
Why can't the U.S. just straighten out its act and stop acting like a bunch of criminals? I mean, it's habituated and it's costing them their longevity.
I think the simple answer would be that due to the social structure, some of the worst people rise to the top. It makes for an easy way to exploit, an easy way to get people that are not at all, shameful about manipulation and actually very good at manipulating. They may not be always crafty and getting everything they want done, but they do it. They do some of it. And they get what they want, and they screw everybody else. So I think we have a social structure that enables people with charisma and power and wealth and all this to come together in a way that's like fundamentally flawed, and I think that's in their interest to continue to promote the ideology that's been with us since, the Constitution. It works for us as far as our country, and then everybody else gets screwed, because we keep taking from them, Africa or whoever else. That's my best guess is we've got some of the worst people running the country.
They tell us the cream rises to the top, but really the scum rises to the top. People with ethics and morals, they don't want any part of it. They drop out at some point. Or
it's a cruel system. It's
killed,
very cruel.
So
politics in general,
it is.
It's very cruel because you see how they cut each other down, and they, anybody that gets in there is making any kind of change. They shoot them or they shoot at them. They take them down. They take them out. They find some way to make them look bad. Any normal person would not be able to handle that. Any regular old Joe like me or you or anybody else could not handle that kind of humiliation and attack and threats.
Yep.
They probably incentivize evil too, in a way. Like, here's $1 million if you just shut up.
Yeah.
That's what I think of politics in general.
I still take offense at Carlo's suggestion that we are not being altruistic with our foreign aid. I reject that in its entirety, Carlo. We're the best country in the world. All right.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear.
I hear some echo in there from the Republican echo chamber.
Yeah.
There was an Iraqi blogger named Riverbend or Riverdance. I think Riverbend. And she was blogging for a while after the U.S. invasion in 2003. And she pointed out that, you remember, all through the 90s, from the first attack on Iraq in 1991, Iraq was under very severe sanctions, because that's what the U.S. does. It uses siege, basically warfare. It brags about starving children. That just blows my mind. Anyhow, they were under very severe sanctions all through the 90s, and yet the workers in Iraq, the workers that worked on the sewage, that worked on the water, that worked on the electricity, they had no parts to repair, so they jerry-rigged it, and they kept it going. They kept it going with nothing. They kept it going with, duct tape and rubber bands or whatever. I don't know. Well, then the United States invades, like you were saying, Carlo, and there were people there who were perfectly capable. They said, we're putting out bids for reconstruction. There's Iraqis. We can do it. If we can do it with duct tape and rubber bands, we can sure as hell do it with actual building materials. Thanks for your bid, which is like 20 times less than Halliburton's. But we're going to go with Halliburton instead. And then Halliburton would get millions of dollars, didn't even finish one power plant, when there was all kinds of capable workers in Iraq that could have rebuilt with that kind of money. But it is not about helping the people or rebuilding.
No. Dick Cheney, Dustin's talking about Dick Cheney.
He lives up to his name.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a Halliburton icon. Yeah.
There's you can see it in there. Go ahead. Yeah, I was thinking, the way that they sold off Brown and Root, and then he turns around and he says, "Well, we were never in Iraq." We were never there. It wasn't us. He was running that company, and then when he sold it off, of course he's not running it anymore. So it's a little white lie. It's a shady little lie. I mean, it's ridiculous. They're really crafty. You can see it. You can just see it when the way they talk and everything. I mean, they tell these little half lies and they run things under the carpet, just to hide it. Everything, it's you kind of have to some degree. I don't want to say admire, but I kind of envy that ability, because sometimes I wish when I dealt with some severe bullies, I would have some craftiness to myself.
It reminds me of Nancy Pelosi taking her son to Taiwan.
Yeah.
That big provocation, and he's like on the board of some lithium companies or something like that. And so, and then Biden with Ukraine and his son in Ukraine, like the corruption, it's just, and it all happens under the table. It's like, the media for the most part provides cover and doesn't expose this disgusting, crooked, what's the word? Corruption, and it's endemic. And so there's not only the geopolitical issues, but behind the scenes, there's all these economic scams, and it's just enriching yourself. So it's there's the whole power dynamic, but then there's also let's get our corporations into Ukraine so we can exploit those things once it's all done. And it's let's cause use Taiwan as a flashpoint to get China, but let's make a whole bunch of money for my son's corporation while we're doing it. And that's just it's disgusting. And these aren't leaders, right? These people aren't leaders that have a vision for humanity and our country and progressing us into the future. That's the opposite. That's what China offers. That's what Russia offers. That's not what the West offers. It should be obvious to folks, but it's not.
And it's like Paula said in one of her podcasts I listened to, is she pointed out Bill Blum, who was a friend of ours, my wife and I, and who's the In Search of Enemies? Oh, his name escaped me.
Is that Stockwell?
Yes,
Oh,
Stockwell. Yeah.
Stockwell.
And one of the things you can derive from that is kind of at self-defeating. Ultimately, U.S. foreign policy is by just picking the people who are to ally with that are most avaricious, and now with the Chinese example, I don't want to say they're not saints, but with their development plan and sticking to it, and really when they say rule of law, they actually mean rule of law. They have taken the mantle from this notion of the superiority of capitalism, which was always based on myths and lies and controlling the propaganda apparatus. And since now that we're at that point, you would think there would be some adaptation that the West would now come to. We have to adapt our greed to somehow accommodate actually helping people rather than destroying them and rendering them slaves and making them live in. But there seems to be nothing coming from that side that expresses that. I mean,
well, I think they have that plan. They have the Great Reset. The Great Reset is basically a jubilee, and it's going to be for everybody, even though the average American owes, credit card debt, student debt, car debt, house debt. Whereas the Wall Street owes in the credit, credit derivatives and stuff, they owe trillions. So what they're going to do is they're going to do a jubilee the way they did it in the old days. People are like, well, they used to wipe the debts out every 50 years or something. Yeah, but guess what? They wiped out all the debts, but guess who was still in power? And guess who was still on the bottom? So that is what I think the Great Reset is. They're going to just wipe out all the debts, and then they are going to say, now you're going to live at a lower standard of living because we just don't have the resources, to keep you at your top standard of living. And it's okay, you'll be happy. Which, humans have a tendency to adapt to whatever situation they're in. you know, so probably by the time the next generation comes along, they've never known any different. But I don't think it's a matter of they want to improve life for everyone. What they want to do is keep their wealth and power, wipe out that unpayable debt, and then lower the standard of living for everyone. Oh, and also set up that Pantacom, is that how you say it? The total surveillance. Yeah, Pantacom, the total information awareness, they called it for a while. They've got this plan where they keep everybody under surveillance at all times. So if you get out of line, you can be cut off or dragged away in the middle of the night like they do in Ukraine, right? All kinds of people are missing in Ukraine. They have that list, and people just disappear, and no one knows where they went to because they have the total surveillance, but we don't have total surveillance. Something happens across the river, you don't know. Now, the U.S. with its satellites knows, but they're going to pretend like they don't.
Yeah. Doug Valentine compared it to the Phoenix program. And when Christopher Black agreed with that, he gave a very concise definition of the Phoenix program if people were watching last week.
Go back and watch that program, guys, out there. You guys, we have about 3 minutes. I just had a weird question, sort of off the subject, but it's sort of going along with what we've been saying. What do you guys think of the idea of a basic income guarantee?
I think it's a good idea as long as it's not under the control of the ruling class, which is the problem. But having everybody not have to live on the streets or beg for money or work at horrible jobs to be able to have a basic standard of living, I think it's a good idea. The problem is always in the execution, right? Right. Sounds like a good idea until they get a hold of it. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. You said something bad about your overlords. You don't get your ration this month.
Right. The problem is that capitalists control the government. And so, I mean, is it good if they do something nice for us, like give us a basic income and keep us off the streets being homeless? It's good, but it's not the solution. The solution is to overthrow the capitalist dictatorship and replace it with a government of, by, and for the people. So, I mean, as long as capitalist dictatorship, I hope they're as nice as they possibly can. But again, just because they offer a basic income, because they choose to be nice at this one particular time for whatever their reasons are, that's not really going to fix things going forward. But I would be for it, of course. CARLO?
Just two brief things. I don't trust them. Past looking at them, there's some con in there somewhere I haven't detected yet. The other answer is the arts. One of the things I do late at night is I fantasize moving out of the Washington, D.C. area because it's tremendously expensive. But we're old now. My wife and I are old. And I always see I look at the real estate, and they always give you the mean income of the area you're moving into. And I realize that Rosalie and I are living well below the poverty level for the rest of the country. And the answer to that is, and we want for nothing that we want. We want for nothing that we desire. And that's because we're involved in the arts. My wife is an artist. I'm a poet. All we do all day long is she makes art, I read, and I write my work. I do my work, which with our dramatic narratives. And we don't even think about anything that you would see in these advertisements. We don't relate to any of it. We don't own any of it. We're not. The desire's not there. All of our desire is in the arts. Mm-hmm. So if the whole culture became artists, and I'm not, in a certain sense, I don't agree with that, because given the effort I put into it, there's so many amateurs out there that kind of get in my way, that control the institutional nature of my particular discipline, which is poetry. But if people were more involved in something that was less materialistic, and I know Dustin agrees with this, mm-hmm. I think that there would be less for the ruling class to exploit. We would become unexploitable. It's like I joked when we had what's his name, Leo on. I think it was Leo, but I said, look, because he has the clothesline, right? I said, well, I can't really help you, Leo. I get $10 a year clothing allowance, and I just bought a bag of tube socks, so I can't help you. And I was serious about that. That's the way we live, and we're perfectly happy living that way.
Yeah, us too. We don't spend a lot of money. I'm still wearing clothes that say "Made in California." That's old clothes. Can I just put in a plug? You reminded me. You said you live in Washington D.C. In Washington D.C. at the Department of Justice on October 8th, from noon to 2, there's going to be a demonstration for Julian Assange, for the United States to leave him alone and quit trying to extradite him and let him out of his dungeon. So if anyone that lives around Washington, D.C. would like to go, October 8th, noon to 2, Department of Justice.
All right. Well, thanks for being on the program today, Paula, and thanks, Billy Bob and Carlo, for navigating the conversation. It's been a wonderful discussion of the Foreign Policy Review. Come back next Thursday. We'll surprise you with a new guest. And remember to subscribe to our channel while you're watching right now. And remember, you can also leave comments during the program and questions. So without further ado, have an excellent afternoon. Foreign Policy Review. Thanks for watching.
In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted, and sometimes regressive, where the words fake news have come to mean other people's opinions, it is vital to rely on news platforms with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York Parrot, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations. We focus on the news that matters, like self-empowerment, entrepreneurship, finances, health, security, politics, and more. We strive to curb violence, racial and economic discrimination, and to promote peace and socio-economic development of multiculturally diverse world. As we give voice to the people, we also give your business a voice and make it heard.